The first letter appeared when I was merely 6 years old. It marked the beginning of what became a daily occurrence, yet never a routine. Every morning, I found it lying on the doorstep of my home, neatly folded and always unmarked. The paper was thick and yellow, as if aged, and the handwriting was precise and elegant. Inside, the poem, inked in a way that shimmered in the morning sun, described the day ahead of me. In that letter, the poem spoke of simple childhood joys. The rhymes predicted a day filled with games, laughter, and an unexpected surprise. Looking back, it seems to me that the first letter was a kind of introduction, a gentle start to the bond that was to develop between me and this mysterious sender. As I grew, the letters became more complex, describing not just joyful moments, but also a warning of difficulties. One day, at the age of 10, a poem warned me about a tough decision I had to make at school. Thanks to it, I was prepared and avoided a conflict that could have had unpleasant consequences. There were also letters predicting minor accidents, like falling off a bike or losing something important, allowing me to prevent them. These letters were like a compass, guiding me through life. They never detailed the day exactly. Rather, they painted pictures of possibilities, giving me hints on how to behave or what to avoid. Some of them were more enigmatic, prompting me to ponder more deeply about what the day might bring. By the age of 18, the letters began to describe more significant life events, such as meeting a person who became my best friend, or deciding on a field of study. They were like signposts at the crossroads of life decisions, allowing me to be guided by my intuition, but also by the hints from these mysterious parcels. These letters accompanied me over the years, becoming an integral part of my daily life. I didn't know their sender, but I felt a strange bond, as if someone was watching over my life from a perspective I couldn't see myself. Only now, looking back over all of those years, do I understand how much these letters have influenced my life. Over the past few months, the routine of my morning letters began to take a new turn. In addition to the usual poem describing the upcoming day, I started to notice additional lines. These new segments were vague, sparse in detail, yet full of profound meaning. They spoke of something to come in the future, something inevitable, but undefined. Initially, these future-oriented snippets were brief, barely a sentence or two at the end of each poem. Over time, these fragments began to lengthen. What's more, the main part of the poem, the one about my day, became increasingly shorter. At first, I didn't pay much attention to this, but as time went on, I started to feel uneasy. Month by month, these proportions reversed. Now, the larger part of the letter was occupied by these disturbing future predictions, and the descriptions of my day were reduced to a few laconic sentences. These future messages were full of metaphors, ambiguous and mysterious. They spoke of dusk coming sooner than anticipated, or a shadow falling on the path that had been clear until now. Each morning, reading these words, I felt a growing sense of unease. What were these metaphorical hints supposed to mean? Did they indicate some impending danger, or perhaps a major change in my life? Why did my future suddenly start to take up such a large space in these poems, instead of the ordinary, everyday events? These questions circled in my mind, introducing an element of uncertainty and apprehension into my previously orderly life. I began to wonder if my fate was already predetermined by these mysterious prophecies, and if there was any way I could influence what was to come. This morning, as always, there was a letter waiting for me under my door. Opening it, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The paper was cold and rough under my fingers, and the words I saw made my heart beat faster. Here is the poem I read. In the quiet of dawn, as the world still sleeps, lies a truth untold, a secret it keeps. The sun will rise, and the birds will sing, but for you, dear soul, it's a different thing. The shadows lengthen as the day grows old, whispering tales that have never been told. A path you've walked with steady stride now leads to a place where worlds collide. Beware the chime when the clock strikes noon, for it sings a song of an impending doom. A fleeting moment, a transient breath, creeps closer to you, the envoy of death. The stars tonight will not gleam for you, their light extinguished in the midnight blue. For when the clock heralds the end of day, your journey, my friend, will fade away. So heed these words, a forewarning clear. The end of your path is drawing near. Embrace the truth, for it's not in vain. In the dusk of life, only memories remain. The ending of the poem sent a chill down my spine. Every word felt like an echo of a terrifying prophecy. The end of your path is drawing near. These words, in particular, stuck in my memory. Death, which I had so far avoided thanks to the warnings in the letters, now seemed inevitable. I spent the entire morning in contemplation. Could this letter be merely metaphorical? Was this truly the day when my path was supposed to end? Could I do anything to prevent it? These questions swirled in my head, not allowing me any peace. The revelation in this morning's poem left me in a state of profound unease. Up until now, the letters have been a guiding force, a means to navigate the uncertainties of each day. They offered foresight, a glimpse into the immediate future that allowed me to act, to change course when necessary. But this latest message was different. It was enigmatic and final. It didn't provide a clear path or a problem I could solve. It simply stated an end, my end, without giving any clue as to how it might come about or how I might avoid it. The feeling of control I had grown accustomed to was suddenly gone, replaced by a sense of absolute helplessness. The realization that I couldn't prepare for or prevent what was coming was crushing. I felt trapped in a destiny that I had no power to change, a stark contrast to the sense of agency the letters had previously provided. Throughout the day, a cloud of despondency hung over me. I tried to distract myself with daily tasks, but my thoughts continuously circled back to the poem's ominous words. The idea that my life, which had always seemed so vibrant and full of possibilities, might be drawing to a close was overwhelming. I felt a deep sorrow for all the plans I had made, the dreams I had yet to realize. The uncertainty of not knowing what was to come, or when, was paralyzing. In the past, the letters had been a source of comfort and guidance, but now they were a source of dread. I found myself wishing I had never received that final message, longing for the ignorance that had once shielded me from the inevitability of fate. I was left with a profound sense of melancholy, a heavy weight on my heart that I couldn't shake off. The joy and curiosity that the letters once inspired had been replaced with fear and resignation, a somber realization of the fragile nature of life and the inexorable march of time. In the midst of my emotional turmoil, a peculiar sight caught my eye. another letter lying on the floor beneath my door. This was unprecedented. Never before had I received more than one letter in a day. With a trembling hand, I reached for it, the paper feeling unusually heavy, as if laden with ominous portent. I unfolded it to reveal another poem, its words immediately sending a shiver down my spine. Here is the poem that lay before me. As twilight's veil descends on thee, a whisper stirs the silent tree. The journey's end, it calls your name, a final dance, a dying flame. Closer now the shadows creep, stealing light as darkness seeps. A quiet footstep, a fleeting sigh, death's embrace is drawing nigh. Through the veil a figure looms, its presence fills the empty rooms. With each tick of the clock it nears, feeding on your deepest fears. The end, it comes, not with a roar, but a silent step outside your door. Accept the fate that comes to be, for in its grasp, you'll soon be free. The realization that death was not just an abstract concept in a distant future, but a tangible presence drawing nearer with every passing moment, was overwhelming. The notion of a figure, a physical embodiment of death approaching me, filled me with a sense of dread unlike any I had ever experienced before. The finality of the words, "For in its grasp you'll soon be free," echoed in my mind. It was a chilling reminder of the inevitability of my fate. I found myself glancing nervously around, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lurking in the corners of my room. For the first time, the letters that had once been a source of guidance and insight felt like a curse. I was gripped by a sense of impending doom, the feeling that my time was running out, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The letters had always provided a sense of control over my destiny, but now they seemed to mock me with their foreboding predictions. As the day turned to night, the weight of the poem's words bore heavily upon me. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind against the windows, seemed to herald the arrival of the inevitable. The anticipation of death's approach was as torturous as the event itself, leaving me in a state of paralyzing fear and despair. Overwhelmed by the crushing weight of the poem's predictions and the encroaching shadow of my own demise, I found myself grasping for connection in my final hours. In a state of emotional collapse, I reached out to my friends and family, desperate to hear their voices, to feel their presence in what I believed were my last moments. I called my friends first, my voice trembling as I tried to explain the bizarre and terrifying situation. I recounted the daily poems and their eerie accuracy, and how today's letters had foretold my end. There was silence on the other end of the line, a mix of confusion and concern. They offered words of comfort, suggesting rational explanations and urging me to calm down. But their words felt hollow against the uncertainty of the letter's predictions. The most difficult call was to my parents. When they answered, I could barely speak through my tears. I reminded them about the letters, how for years they had guided and warned me, and how now they had pronounced my impending death. There was a heavy pause as they processed my words. Then, in a voice filled with worry and urgency, they told me they were coming to me as fast as they could. They insisted that I wasn't alone, that they would be there for me, no matter what. Their determination provided a small glimmer of comfort, but it was overshadowed by the sense of finality that the letters had instilled in me. As I hung up the phone, I felt a profound sense of farewell. The conversation had an air of closure, a finality that was both comforting and heart-wrenching. I sat there, surrounded by the silent echoes of my goodbyes, waiting for my parents to arrive, waiting for the inevitable. As the night deepened around me, for at least 2 hours, I sat motionless, my gaze fixed on the door, oscillating between the hope of seeing my parents arrive and the dread of another letter slipping through the gap. The room grew dimmer as the evening progressed, shadows lengthening across the floor, enhancing the sense of isolation and expectancy. And then, a faint rustling sound broke the silence, the unmistakable noise of paper sliding across the floor. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the corner of a new letter emerging from beneath the door. In an instant, I was on my feet, propelled by a mix of fear and an overwhelming need for answers. I rushed to the door, flinging it open with a desperate intensity, my eyes scanning the hallway for any sign of the mysterious letter sender. The corridor was empty, the usual sounds of the building eerily absent. I stepped out, looking left and right, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps, but there was no one. Whoever had been delivering these ominous messages had vanished without a trace, as if they were never there. Disheartened and filled with a sense of growing unease, I slowly closed the door and returned to the room. The letter lay there, innocuous yet laden with foreboding, a silent testament to the unseen hand that had guided and haunted me for years. I picked it up, feeling the weight of the paper, yet hesitating to open it. What more could it say? What further revelation or doom could it possibly hold? As I stood there, holding the unopened letter, the room felt oppressively quiet, the ticking of the clock unnaturally loud, marking the passage of time towards an unknown end. The urge to read the letter battled with the fear of what it might reveal, leaving me suspended in a moment of profound apprehension and uncertainty. With a surge of aggression fueled by fear and frustration, I tore the envelope into shreds, a symbolic defiance against the fate it purported to bring. The poem inside lay bare, its words stark and unyielding, a final declaration of the inevitable. Here is the poem that confronted me. When the clock's hands align in the midnight's embrace, a shadow will fall, leaving barely a trace. As darkness envelops the land in its might, a soul shall depart with the fading of light. The midnight hour with its silent toll marks an end of a journey, a departing soul. No more shall the sun rise for some eyes to see. At the stroke of 12, a spirit shall be free. The shadows whisper, an end is nigh. In the heart of night, under the starless sky, a final chapter, written in the stars above, concludes tonight in a world devoid of love. So wait for the chime, the final bells ring, as time delivers its last, unyielding sting. Embrace the night, let go of your fear, for in the embrace of death, all becomes clear. Reading these lines, a cold dread settled over me. The finality of, "At the stroke of 12 your spirit shall be free," echoed ominously in the silence of the room. The clock on the wall seemed louder now, each tick a somber reminder of the fleeting nature of time. The poem's reference to midnight was stark and unequivocal. There were no riddles to solve, no ambiguity, just a clear, unalterable deadline. The thought of my existence being snuffed out like a candle flame at the arbitrary strike of a clock was both terrifying and surreal. As the night deepened, the weight of the impending hour grew heavier. I felt caught in the limbo of waiting, each minute stretching out endlessly, yet rushing towards me in an inexorable conclusion. The certainty and the specificity of the midnight hour filled me with a sense of helplessness, a pawn in a game whose rules I never understood. The silence of the night was a stark contrast to the turmoil within me, a quiet stage set for the final act of my story. The silence of the night enveloped me, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging within. As I sat in the dimly lit room, the clock's ticking seemed amplified, each sound a drumbeat marching towards the inevitable hour. With every minute that passed, the anticipation built, a crescendo of fear and anxiety. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each more terrifying than the last, and painting scenarios of what the midnight chime might bring. The room felt increasingly oppressive, the shadows stretching across the walls as if reaching out to me. I could almost feel the weight of time pressing down, a physical force drawing me closer to the fateful moment. My body was racked with shivers, a cold dread seeping into my bones. I tried to steady my breathing, but it came in short, ragged gasps, betraying my attempt at calm. As the clock's hand inched closer to 12, my heart pounded against my chest, a relentless drum echoing the ticking of the clock. The seconds seemed to stretch and warp, time itself bending under the gravity of the impending moment. I found myself counting the ticks, each one a step closer to the unknown. And then, in those last few seconds before midnight, a paralyzing fear took hold. I squeezed my eyes shut, an instinctive reaction to shield myself from what was to come. The room fell eerily silent, the ticking of the clock now a distant sound, as if time itself was holding its breath. The chime of midnight shattered the silence, but it was quickly overshadowed by the shrill ring of my phone. My heart leapt into my throat as I scrambled to answer it, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The voice that greeted me was broken, laden with sorrow. It was my father, his words coming through sobs and gasps. He told me about the accident, the devastating crash that had torn my mother away from us. His voice cracked as he uttered the unbearable truth. She was gone. As I listened, numb and disbelieving, the prophecy of the letters became painfully clear. It wasn't my physical death they had foretold, but the death of a part of my soul. The world around me seemed to fall away, leaving me in a void of grief and shock. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a profound sense of loss that engulfed my entire being. In that moment, at the exact stroke of midnight, something inside me did indeed die. The loss of my mother was a chasm that swallowed the light, the joy, and the warmth of my world. The prophecy had fulfilled itself, not through my demise, but through a loss that was equally shattering. The room felt colder, emptier, as if her passing had altered the fabric of my reality. The night silence returned, heavier and more oppressive than before, filled with a sorrow as deep and as endless as the darkness itself.